So you've probably at this point seen me mention FRQs in the classroom stream. So let's talk a little bit about what they are and how they make up the AP exam. So on the AP Gov exam, there are 4 different types of FRQs. There is the concept application question, the quantitative analysis question, the Supreme Court comparison question, and then the argument essay question. Now, you will have one of each 4 of those questions on the exam, barring that the exam is in its traditional form and not changed at all because of COVID-19. So long as that it is the traditional exam, you'll have one of each of those questions. The exam weighting, so they are 50% of your overall score, those questions combined, and each of those questions is going to be worth 12.5% of that 50%, okay? The concept application questions worth 3 points, quantitative analysis is worth 4 points, Supreme Court comparison is worth 4 points, and the argument essay is worth 6 points. Now, for the first 3 types of questions, you get 20 minutes to complete them, and then for the argument essay, you get 40 minutes to complete those. So all 4 questions together are going to be worth 50% of your exam. The other half of the exam score comes from multiple choice questions. So let's talk a little bit about each type of FRQ question. So the first is concept analysis. And this question is going to present you with some sort of scenario. You'll be given an excerpt from some sort of primary document, a quote from a primary document, or some sort of situation. Maybe they'll talk about an act that was passed by Congress, something of that nature. So you're going to be presented with this concept. This type of question is going to assess students' ability to describe and explain the effects of a political institution, behavior, or process. Okay, so they're wanting you to use your knowledge that you have gained in this class to describe or explain this scenario. And additionally, this question is going to assess student ability to transfer understanding of course concepts and apply them to a situation. Okay, so they are wanting you to take what you are learning and apply that, okay, is what this question is asking you to do. Now, one thing to keep in mind with concept application questions is these are not opinion questions. In most cases, this question is going to have a right or wrong answer, okay, so just keep that in mind. Quantitative analysis questions, generally you all are going to find these to be the easiest questions. It's going to present you with some sort of data. It might be a table, it might be a graph, a map, an infographic, maybe a political cartoon. So you're going to have some sort of data. And you're going to be asked to describe the data presented and identify trends and differences and then draw conclusions. So essentially this question is going to give you some sort of chart. You're going to answer questions based on the information in the chart. Again, most of the time you all are going to find this to be the easiest type of FRQ. The Supreme Court case comparison, and we'll really get into this when we're talking about civil rights and liberties because I think that's a really good time to do it. But this is going to present you with a description of a non-required Supreme Court case and its holding. Okay, so you're required to know 15 Supreme Court cases for the exam. This question is going to present you with a case that is not required. So it's going to give you all the details of that Supreme Court case. And you're going to be asked to identify similarities and differences between this case that it's giving you and a required case. So, for example, one of the required cases for the exam is Brown versus Board of Education. So you might be asked to take a case that they give you and can compare and contrast it with Brown v. Board of Education. So you're just going to have to explain those similarities and differences between the cases. And again, we will likely start practicing this more in terms of civil rights and civil liberties when we've covered all of those required cases. And then the last one, and the one that sometimes students are going to find the most difficult, is the argument essay. And this is going to assess your ability to articulate a defensible claim or thesis that responds to the question. Okay, so with this argument essay, you do have to establish a thesis and a line of reasoning. Okay, so you have to lay out your argument and a line of reasoning. You have to provide evidence from one of the foundational documents listed in the question to support the claim. So again, we talked about how you have to know 9 foundational documents. So it's going to provide you with 2 or 3 of those that you're going to have to reference as evidence to your argument. Then you're going to have to provide evidence from a second foundational document or from knowledge of the course concepts to support your claim. Then you're going to have to use reasoning to explain why the evidence supports the claim. And then you have to respond to an opposing or alternate perspective using refutation, concession, or rebuttal. So what the argument essay asks you to do is write your thesis and establish that line of reasoning. Use 2 pieces of evidence, one coming from one of the required foundational documents to back up your thesis. You have to use that reasoning to explain why your evidence supports your thesis. And then you have to respond to that opposing viewpoint. So this is why you get more time to write the argument essay. There's more involved in that. Okay, so one thing when you're writing these FRQs that you need to keep in mind is, what is the question asking me to do? AP means answering the prompt. You need to answer the question. What's it asking me to do? Make sure that you answer the question. So if it is asking you to identify, you need to indicate or provide information about a specific topic without elaboration or explanation. So especially in those concept application questions, these can be short answer. It doesn't have to be a paragraph answer. So for example, the free speech clause is part of the Bill of Rights that protects the opinion polling referenced in the scenario. Okay? In this case, it would just be asking what clause is referenced in the scenario, okay? So that you can write a short 1-sentence answer for some of these questions if it asks you to identify. Next is to describe. So this is more elaborate than identification. You're going to use definitions and examples, okay? Describe similarities or differences. Describe a pattern or trend. You got to use data, multiple points of data, okay? So describing is more than identification. This is where you're going to have a little bit longer answer. You're trying to provide those relevant characteristics of a specific topic. So for example, this free speech clause includes the protection of symbolic speech as seen in Tinker v. Des Moines with the student use of black armbands to protest the Vietnam War. This was different than the traditional speech of the leaflets used by Schneck to protest World War I. Okay? So make sure that if you're describing, you're doing more than just identifying, okay? You're using those definitions and examples. And then another one is explain or use reasoning. So this is a more expanded description that includes causation. So you want to include that because or that why or how. So you're providing information about how or why a relationship, process, pattern, situation, or outcome occurs, and you're using that evidence or reasoning. So for example, this free speech clause could be seen as more important than the voting rights, because when relatively few citizens vote in a local election, local officials might be more willing to change policy when a large number of residents use their rights to free speech to protest for a change in policy. Okay? So make sure that you are using that because or the why and how if you are explaining. All right, so some tips to writing FRQs. Break the questions into parts. You can erase the letters later. So if it's A, B, and C, answer it A, B, and C. Be specific in your writing and examples, okay? Make sure that you are being very specific with your answers. You don't have to write long-winded paragraphs every time you answer, but you do have to have that specific answer. Use examples and analysis when requested. On graph and data questions, make sure you refer to the graph. Answer the question with facts. You're not going to just give opinions on politics, okay? Make sure that you are using factual information from the course. And always use complete sentences. Okay, so this is just an overview of the different types of FRQ questions. There will be another video explaining the concept application question, which is what we're going to start with.